Okay, hi everybody. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm kind of honored to be here because I'm totally honored to be here. I never in a million years would have expected that 20 years ago when we made Myst, anybody would be interested in it 20 years later. So this is pretty incredible. I get started. Thank you all for coming. It makes me feel old. Postmortem, this is what a name. I want to go back to a little earlier than Myst. In 1984, when 1984 was just a little bit after the Mac was created, so it was 4 years later, and Rand and I were in different places. Rand was in Texas, my brother, and I should say that Rand Miller, my brother, and I'm Robyn Miller, and we were the guys who made Myst, just in case anybody was here. Wow. I just had this feeling inside me of just utter confidence. Wow. I want to bring you home with me now. In 1988, Rand was in Texas, I was in Washington State, and he called me. He said, I've got this idea for this interactive storybook. I wasn't interested really in this, but he was really into computers. I kind of wasn't. I didn't have a computer, in fact. He wanted to send me this thing called HyperCard, which he did. And I went into my parents' basement. They had a computer in their basement. And I started working on, I started drawing a manhole cover. That was the first part of the story. I don't know why I drew a manhole cover. And I continued drawing a linear story. I drew the manhole cover open. And I just continued drawing sequentially this storybook. But I got to this vine growing out of the manhole, and I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point. I didn't know if I wanted to go up the vine or down into the manhole. And from there, the medium itself became nonlinear. And it's as if the medium was calling out to be nonlinear. It was not something that we really invented at that point in time, or really were trying to do. It was just, it just happened on its own. So that was the manhole in 1988. And then we continued making these games that had all the same qualities, one after the other. And you saw that those screens before. They were black and white, totally, totally simple. There were a lot of kids' games in there. Myst, point and click, first person point of view, and the player as the main character. You didn't have an avatar or anything like that. You just sort of were in the world, and you were the person in that world wandering around. You also had this quality of everything being explorable. In the manhole, not so much. But then later on, we kind of realized as we would watch people play that people would see a door, and they would definitely want to go through that door. But if people saw something like a forest in the distance, well, they wanted to go to that forest. If people saw, no matter what it was, a drawer, anything, they wanted to be able to explore the entire world. They didn't want any boundaries to that world, and so we attempted as much as possible to create no boundaries. Now, nowadays, almost every game they're just mammoth. They pretty much have no boundaries. Back then, it was a little different. We got to a point around 1990 where we had this idea that, hey, let's make one of these worlds for grown-ups, for an older audience. And we wanted to add something a little bit more like a story, a nonlinear story. And we wanted to make the player like a protagonist. We wanted believable characters. And we wanted the player, as the protagonist, to make some sort of ethical choice between right and wrong. We thought that would really create an interesting story of some sort. There'd be an emotional provocation. So we created the gray summons. We created the idea of the gray summons, and we proposed it to Activision, and Activision told us to stick to children's games. Which really was disheartening. We were not doing very well at that point in time. And so, and we were really not doing very well. We were eating, and I'm not exaggerating, we were eating rice and beans and government cheese, and that was our diet. We were probably very healthy. A lot more healthy than I am today. But this was, this was the end of, potentially the end of our career in gaming. And I think, though, as a matter of fact, I know, we had learned so much, we had gleaned so much from what we had done up to that point, because everything we had done in those earlier products, we took and we folded into what became Myst, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. It was almost at that exact point, or a little afterwards, that Sunsoft of Japan came to us and said, hey, we've got this great idea. We would like you to make a game for an older audience. Just like you've been doing, except not for kids, okay? Because we don't want you to do that anymore. We want you to make something, but for like everybody else. And so it blew our minds, and we were on board totally. We just had no idea, what to do in terms of that. It was 1991. I'm just give you a sense of what time this was, okay? This guy was around. This was one of the most popular movies of the year. These were cell phones, and we couldn't afford them. And this was the internet, and we couldn't afford it. So we didn't know at all what to do in terms of our game, but we knew we kind of knew what we wanted it to be. At that point was a nonlinear story again, believable characters. We wanted advanced graphics, much more advanced graphics than we had been doing. We didn't know what that meant at all. In fact, we thought we would probably be hand-drawing the graphics. So Myst, for a while at that point, was going to be all hand-drawn. And it was intimidating to think, okay, we're going to make this game. It's going to be really advanced graphics, but we're going to have to draw it all. What would that mean? And some sort of puzzles. What would the puzzles be? And then again, some sort of ethical choice. That was really intimidating. What would this ethical choice be? Mystery. We knew, okay, yeah, it's going to be a mystery. Just to go through some inspirations that were behind Myst, D&D. Growing up, our brother, not Rand, not me, but our other brother played a lot of D&D. And so we were kind of surrounded by that a bit. He would get all of his friends together at least once a week, and they would sit and play it. And so Rand and I were able to observe when there's a really good dungeon master, you get this thing where it's a great story can happen. It's creative, it's fun, it can be a blast. And maybe not so much with a bad dungeon master, but it can be a really cool and adventuresome and exploratory, cool thing. In fact, Rand created his own dungeon at one point in time. He wanted to do that, and what he threw out was rolling to create your characters, and rolling for your dexterity, rolling for your strength, rolling for these other aspects of your character. And he said, okay, you guys are going to play this, and you're just going to be yourselves. Use your own intelligence and just observe within this universe. And in fact, he never used dice at all. He just told people what they saw within that universe. If you look, there's one drawing over here, and it's Rand's dungeon, drawing from Rand's dungeon. When we were creating Myst, we got to the very last age we were designing. It was the mechanical age. And if you notice a similarity, we used this as a part of the design. We kind of like, what are we going to do for this last age? Oh, let's get out that old dungeon you designed, Rand. Zork. We had played Zork. Rand had played both the Zorks. There was all kinds of other video games before Myst, obviously, but we hadn't had a lot of experience with those other video games. We had played those Zork games, and I had played like half of Zork 2. It was incredibly cool. Rand had played both of them, and they were definitely an inspiration for us because they were these nonlinear worlds. So, and I'm just going to quickly go through, Star Wars. Of course, the world there, from a very early time, it was the myth behind that universe was deeply inspirational. Portals to other universes. We took almost directly from the Chronicles of Narnia. And then Jules Verne, the idea of an island we took from Mysterious Island, and then just old books. We kind of stole that idea. We stole a lot of things in a way. I don't know if all creativity is kind of stealing in a sense. Okay, pre-production. I don't know where we got the idea for Two Brothers. It had to be subconscious on some sense, on some level. But we went with Two Brothers. Oh, this is interesting. When Sunsoft came to us, they said, look, what we're going with is game machines. That's what we want, guys. You take everything else. We don't want all the PC stuff. That's not valuable. What we think is valuable is game machines. So it's like, great, we got all the PC stuff, and they went with game machines. But game machines at that time had no hard drive buffer and very small memory buffer. So we had to design around that for Myst. That was an interesting design restriction. So how do we design around that? We had to load different pieces of Myst. We had to compartmentalize Myst, which we did by creating ages. This works really well for design. Probably a lot of game makers have discovered this along the way. A lot of designers have discovered this along the way as well, just to fit pieces of a thing in your mind and to know there's one central place. If you think of wandering around Disneyland, you always know there's that central location, and then you go out to all these different areas, and you always feel like, yeah, okay, I can always, no matter what, if I get lost, I can always go back to that central location. In fact, we had on an earlier product that we had done the same exact thing. We'd had this ship, went around to all these planets. You can always very easily get back to that central ship. So we were kind of used to that idea. But I don't know if we would have done that on Myst had there not been that memory restriction. It was something that we did, and it worked out really well. Puzzles. I actually hadn't put this part into my presentation until last night. I was in an interview, and somebody asked me, oh, how'd you come up with puzzles? I completely forgot about it. We had an idea when we created Myst that most people don't like puzzles. Gamers love puzzles, but we weren't creating Myst for gamers. We were creating the game for essentially non-gamers. And non-gamers they don't like puzzles. So a good puzzle shouldn't feel like a puzzle. It should feel very familiar and not arbitrary. It should have a sense that it's just a part of the world, and that it's just something you're just figuring out because it's, it's like a thrown breaker in your house. What happens when the electricity goes out? Well, you go and you switch the breaker back on. And so we kind of did that as much as possible in Myst. Now, we created some bad puzzles in Myst, but we also made some good ones. And so, to a certain extent, I think Myst worked because of that. In fact, we made some really bad puzzles in Myst. There's one or two that just that suck. But there's some that are pretty good. So you solve a good puzzle. You're able to solve a good puzzle with just observation and basic common sense. So here's an arbitrary puzzle that we did in Myst. Not good. This one is not arbitrary at all. And if you remembered, if you played Myst, it was just the windmill that pumps water up from the sea, and you've got this container full of water, and then there's the water pressure that powers everything on the island. It's really just, maybe doesn't feel like a puzzle at all. It just feels like you're trying to power stuff on the island. And then you've got this puzzle where you're just you've got a chest at the bottom of this lighthouse, and it's stuck down there. It's got something in it. You've got to bring the water up inside the lighthouse. It's definitely a surreal environment, but the puzzle itself doesn't necessarily feel so arbitrary. Okay, while we were designing, this was so great for us. We had no fans, we had no demographic, no sales projections, no outside expectations of any sort. So it's like we just had a ton of fun. We didn't have to second guess any of our choices. We just got to explore the world as we were designing, and which was fantastic. It was really, really, I think it was a rare experience. I don't know how often people get to really do that. We literally we were creating this world for ourselves, and I think that was one of the reasons Myst did well, is because we made it for ourselves. And that all really took place during the design. A lot of it took place during the design, just having fun with it. We got to have a lot of fun with it. So much so, and this is an example of that in just even the name. I don't know, it was like a 30-second phone call where it's just like, hey, what should we name it? How about Myst? Okay, good. Whereas Ribbon, I don't know, the Ribbon, it took months to name Ribbon. So, because there was multiple people involved, multiple companies involved, it's just the difference. This is, once we had totally designed it, we came up with a proposal. These are pages from the proposal. Kind of interesting. Brought it back to Sunsoft. They said, great, we love it, let's go with it. That's the original budget for Myst. We came up with the amount we thought it would cost. We doubled it, added some more. Then we got together, we had hired a couple people, and we play tested it in a D&D fashion. And we did that because we wanted to find any big problems with the game. So it's like, okay, you're standing on a dock, this is off to your right, this is in front of you, and we found issues with the game at that point. It really worked incredibly well. So I recommend that. It was excellent for us, worked well. Production. There's some things in this production that aren't really production. I don't know, there's kind of little of both production and pre-production, but we had a lot of questions about how do we resolve certain things in production, like our advanced graphics, our protagonist who makes this so-called ethical choice, our believable characters, and this nonlinear plot. Our advanced graphics, like I said, we were going to hand draw the whole thing, and I did spend some time toward the beginning, just like in Photoshop. I was drawing things, and I got really scared, thinking, oh my God, what have we gotten ourselves into? there's no way, I can't draw this stuff. This is gonna look crappy. And so, and then I got out Stratavision and I started drawing basically grayscale, extrusion maps. If you don't know what an extrusion map is, it isn't important. It was this kind of thing that kind of looked like this, and color maps, and I made something that looked like Myst Island, and I was able to create an island. That's all that's important. And once I created an island, a single island, then we knew, okay, we can make a 3D world. And it was like, from that point on, we were home free, and we knew the world was going to look very, very different and cinematic, and we were thrilled. And then we went to town, creating these worlds. Now, right there, that screen you see is 920 by 1080. I've stretched it. I've made it very big. The actual size of Myst was more like that size. That was the gameplay size. So it was a very tiny resolution. And we were able to do that. The shots took between 2 to 14 hours to render each shot. So the more complex shots, and we had to do things like hide everything on the island except exactly what you were looking at. The protagonist, of course, is whoever's playing the game. And then you got this whole ethical decision thing. It was just, for us, it was as simple as choosing one of the brothers, one was good and one was evil. And at that point, we hadn't added this other choice. As far as believable characters, we had some real problems there because there was this issue of one-way communication. When you're playing this, the other characters, any characters you meet, they communicate to you. They communicate to you, and you don't get to communicate to them. Bless you. And you're in a nonlinear world. At any point in time, while this person is talking to you, you can just walk away. And it totally breaks the spell of believability. As well, we had no method of displaying video at that point in time. When we began the game, when we began production, QuickTime did not exist. So there were some ways to display something like video. They just weren't really they didn't do it very well. So we thought we need to design around these limits. And in terms of a one-way communication, with whatever characters you come across, them speaking in this sort of monologue style, we tried to feature it as much as possible with a one-way device of some sort. In terms of a nonlinear world, again, we tried to feature that problem. And we'd say that all the time. Rand and I would always say, don't fix it as much as feature it. But we tried to feature that nonlinear world with some sort of location-based device. And both of those issues we featured with the books that they were in. So you had to go there, and you had to be in that location, and they were in these little books. QuickTime came along halfway through development, which was, oh my God, when it came along, we were so thrilled. We needed it. So when with them in these books, it was almost like a barrier existed naturally between you and these characters. It was okay for you to walk away from them because there was almost a screen or plate of glass between you and them. And they were fading in and out all the time. And if you had come across them in the real world, it would be okay to walk away from them. That's kind of it. It felt more believable in that respect. So we wanted to make something that felt as believable as possible. It feels really not very believable when a character's standing there talking to you and you turn around and walk away. Or when a character's standing there talking to you and you can't say anything back to them. In this sort of scenario, they didn't expect you to talk to them. because they couldn't have heard you anyway. Plot. Okay. Our plot was set up in basically like the islands were set up. Very simple style of plot. If I were to outline it, this is basically what it would have looked like in the beginning when we had first designed the game. It was something that anybody, or at least us designing the game, could have fit in our heads, that we did fit in our minds very easily. So it made us happy. I'm just going to compare it against the flowchart for Riven's plot. It was so complex, we never could keep it straight. I think as the developers of Riven, it made it frustrating to work on, for one thing. It also wasn't contained, and you couldn't just sit there and imagine the story from beginning to end as you had experienced it. Like, what is this contained plot? So, whereas Myst, you could think, oh, okay, this was the story, this was bum, 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 A plus B, B, this is, and it was, again, looking back in hindsight, I think there was another reason why Myst was successful. Climactic ending, this was something that came later after our initial design. Ta-da! That's my effect. It's not an audio presentation. Atris. We realized at a certain point in time that we needed this other sort of character at the ending. Because people just choosing between the two brothers was not enough. They needed something more toward the ending. And so we realized that this father would make that choice more complex, and so we added Atris. And so it just changed the ending to something that looked a little bit more like this. And in terms of this whole ethical decision aspect of the game and an emotional provocation, I think it had that. I'm not sure if we really succeeded as much as we wanted to. I know there's games today that really emotionally provoke. We attempted it, and we did our best to emotionally provoke people. And I think instead it was a fun game. But it was an effort. Technical limitations. This is kind of interesting. A single-speed CD-ROM, it was slow. A single-speed CD-ROM is really, really slow. And so we were dealing with slow enough speeds that we had to carefully lay out the island, or the islands, by hand onto the disk. So, Myst Island, and this is kind of an exaggeration. I mean, it's totally an exaggeration, but Myst Island would go here, for example, Stone Ship Age, and then so on. But even more than that, we would say you've got all the shots and animations along this path. They would all go together in one place, or likewise the shots in this location. So if we hadn't have done that, the speed of the CD-ROM we wouldn't have been able to pull from the drive fast enough for anybody to play this game. Okay, distribution. I think this is kind of interesting, just for us, just as a memory. We did show it to a couple of people, but we were working with Broderblend at the time. And, we had all these images of the first island, and this was what we showed to Broderblend when we first sat down with them. when we finally sat down with them, and they were like, they loved it. And that's who we went with for Myst. And they said to us, and I think it was soon after that, they said to us, look, why don't you try music with this? And we were not real keen on that idea. There weren't a lot of video games out with music at that point. I don't remember exactly what video games had music in them. What we liked was diegetic music, and that was something we had been doing in our previous games. So, for example, you walk into a radio station, you go in there, you pull some tapes into, you program the radio station, and then you go to another place where there's a radio and you hear the music that you've programmed. So we felt like if you had soundtrack, it would seem false. It would just pull you out of the environment. Because, music doesn't play in the real world, and so why would it play in this place that we're trying to make it be so believable and so real? And so we said, okay, well, we're gonna write some music, we're gonna put it in Myst, and we're gonna show you how wrong you are. And so we did that. We wrote some music, and we put it in Myst, and instead, it really worked well. And so, so it's like, great, okay, well, now we need to write a soundtrack. And so we did that. And in terms of post-production, okay, this is good. We did pretty extensive game testing, where we would put two people in front of the game, and we always did it with two people because two people would talk to one another. Whenever we would sit one person in front of the game, they would just play, find a mistake or whatever. But we would sit two people so they could talk to one another, and then we could hear whatever they didn't like or did like, and we would sit back there. And when I say we would sit back there behind them or stand back there behind them, it was Rand and I standing behind them, writing notes, extensive notes, and whatever they would talk about, whatever they didn't like, or and then we were able to change things on the fly. So if they're here and they clicked here to go to the planetarium, it's like, okay, great, we didn't make that work because this is the button to go to the planetarium. We could just step in immediately and we could fix that. And so this was vitally, vitally important because we wanted the game to be accessible by everyone, and if they clicked on something and it didn't work, well, that was our problem. That was that was something we had done wrong. And so we spent a lot of time doing this kind of testing. We wanted the interface of the game to be totally, totally invisible and playable not necessarily by gamers. We didn't make the game for gamers. We wanted it to be playable by non-gamers. And so we played it with a lot of non-gamers, and so I can't stress how much that helped us. It also showed us that there were problems with the story and setting up the game. We didn't have what I guess would be called an inciting incident. We put this note. We put this note in the beginning of the game. It hadn't had it previous to this, so we added it, and it introduced people to this new thing we added, a door right by the dock, and a message from our main character now, this person, Atris. And Atris now gives the player a message and sends them on their quest. So people, before this was added, people didn't know what to do. It was something like this play testing, this kind of play testing, where Rand and I were directly involved for long, long periods of time, really gave us a lot of vital information. Here's our new flowchart with the four chamber. Okay, last thing I'm going to quickly touch on here is we did this focus group testing. And this was something Broderbund did And we just thought, what? Focus group testing? I just think it's kind of funny and interesting, and they brought this one group in, and we were like, what? Oh no, they hated the game. The first group hated the game, and man, it was really discouraging. And they brought group 2 in, and man, this group just, they loved it. And I think that was the first time Rand and I got this sense that, wow, this might sell like 100,000 copies. You know, maybe we'll like make our money back, or maybe we can do another game after this. We were so happy. There was a guy there, Bruce Fredericks. I don't know what he's doing now. He showed slogans. And so he showed a bunch of slogans to these guys at the focus group testing. One of the slogans he showed, and oh God, I hated that. No. So it's such a sale. Oh. And you know, over the years, I've just like, oh my God, become your world. So, okay, well, that's it. I don't have. Thank you, thanks. So questions?
So I was curious, so you mentioned a figure of $265,000, and you were saying that you asked for an amount and then you doubled it, or they gave you double what you asked for, or something. What was the first number you asked for and then got?
Okay, great question. We came up with an amount, we doubled it, then added some more, and that end figure was $265,000.
What did it actually cost you?
Oh yeah, well we actually spent more than that. But you know, if only it had occurred to us that hey, you can go back to the people who are paying it and ask for more. Oh, you know, it never occurred to us. So we were like really thinly stretched during the development of the thing, and yeah. I don't. The answer to your question is I don't remember what it actually cost. But
so it looks like you used HyperCard to make this. Did you
Yes.
have to totally hack it like crazy, or was it like out of the box HyperCard?
yeah, the question was, did we have to hack HyperCard like crazy? Because we used HyperCard to create this game. We didn't have to hack it like crazy, but we did have a couple of X commands. And one of the X commands we used was to have, the main X command we used was to do color in HyperCard. But mostly, no, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, we were able to, I would kind of say that if HyperCard had existed, I don't know how we would have ever made Myst. Because, or any of our previous products, it allowed us to do things so quickly. Even like the playtesting I mentioned, where we could just stay there and watch people. If they clicked on something, we could just, boom, pop in, change something. Instantaneously. HyperCard was amazing. Kind of funny, when I was putting together this little presentation, I was using Apple Keynote. It reminded me so much of using HyperCard. Not quite the same thing, but yeah, HyperCard was an amazing tool. You know, I wish something like that still existed, except that you could like put things up online with. But it was just an amazing tool for us.
Could you please briefly discuss the design process behind the bathysphere?
Of what?
The bathysphere. Really hard.
Oh. Okay, yeah. That was our worst puzzle.
Yes, it was.
You know, okay, the design process on that, originally, you walked through it. So all the drawings we have are like pathways and then like little pagoda things that you get to, and then so it was like this huge, almost labyrinthian maze. And it looked really cool in our heads. But then when we got to the production, we realized, oh my, how will we possibly create it? In fact, we started, Chuck Harder was the one who made all that. And he started actually making it. And then we realized, oh, this is going to be this massively huge thing. How are we going to do this? And it's going to be cumbersome to play because you're going to be walking forever. But you know, you actually find your way through it with sounds. We failed on that one totally. That's the answer. So that's one of those arbitrary things we made. That's the worst puzzle in the game. Yeah. So. Over.
I just wanted to say I played Myst in the 4th grade in the computer lab, and it literally has changed my life. It's probably why I'm actually here instead of, I don't know, being a lawyer or something stupid. So thank you for that. My question, did you go into the production knowing Stratavision, or did you have to learn it sort of as you went?
Before, in some of our previous products, there was something we did called spelunks, and we had, in little pieces, little bits here and there, I had used it. We got to know it really well in Myst. So, and it was simple. It was a very simple program as well. Very easy to learn.
Take one from the back seat mics way back here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you got 2 sets.
Over back there.
Hi, Robyn. I'm Ryan from Untold Entertainment. I build adventure games. Thanks so much for making Myst. It was an inspiration for sure.
No, thank you.
Speaking of inspiration, it was really fascinating to me that you listed, is there a weird echo on this thing or what? It was interesting that you listed D&D as an inspiration, but you never mentioned the third-person graphic adventure games with a lot of inventory manipulation. Were those not even on your radar? Like, did you guys ever play them?
Third-person...
Sierra stuff, LucasArts stuff?
Not really on the radar.
Wow.
We didn't play them. Yeah. I had never played any of them. Now, maybe Rand had played some of those, but I hadn't played any of those. Yeah, I think the only game I had ever played previous to Myst was probably Zork 2. And then I just, and that wasn't really my interest. Games, I didn't like games. I didn't play games. Now I play a lot more games.
That's wild.
So yeah. How about way in the back over there?
Hi. First, thank you very much. Beautiful game. It sounded like you had some really creative approaches to game testing, and we just kind of scratched the surface with you. And I specifically, that was really interesting when you said you watched, not just watch to see what people would click on, but how kind of you would react to that. And I wondered if you had more to say about that, like what your expectations were going in and kind of how those shaped your design process for the puzzles.
Yeah, I mean, not just that, we really wanted this to be a game that, we didn't have a target audience, and we just really wanted it to be a game that a very wide group of people could play and enjoy, and the interface, in terms of the interface was extremely important to us. That it kind of feel like it not have an interface, so we just tested that again and again and again. So that was, that testing was extremely, extremely important to us to make sure. The game feels like there isn't an interface, and we wanted it to feel cinematic in a sense, with no computerized elements, and so we designed around that. Whenever Rand and I during design were tempted to say, to give it this cinematic feel as much as possible, because we know there's an audience out there. We knew at the time there was an audience out there that is kind of so, and then the testing, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. I was just curious, you mentioned when you started, when your brother contacted you with the idea, you were living in Washington and he was in Texas. So I was just curious how you guys managed the project and what was the division of labor like in general between you and your brother?
Okay, yeah, well, you know, that went on for like, we lived separately until one of our kids' games, and then by the time Myst came along, we were in the same place. And so that was in Spokane, Washington. And so it was really easy at that point.
And was it like, were you both doing everything, both doing art, both doing story, or did you kind of?
Yeah, well, we were both designing. So during the design process, we were together, you know, in the same room, working on all of that together. And then I would go off and do the art, working with, like I said, Chuck Carter on Myst. And then Rand did all the programming. Yeah, scripting and et cetera.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi, I love the games, and I decided to pick up the Myst novels a couple years ago, just like 2 years ago, and I really enjoyed them, and I enjoyed all the story that they filled in, but I guess I was kind of surprised by the scale of death and destruction in them. It's kind of different from the games, and I was wondering if you could comment on, like, what made you want to develop the backstory? Was it the fans, or was it, you know, was it
Sure,
your head?
yeah. We wanted to, at the point we were, we knew we were going to make another game. And I don't remember at what point that was. Probably after people's. We thought, oh, okay. Well, we knew there was more to the story, and then we thought, well, we wanted to tie those two things together, Myst and this next game we were going to make, and we came up with this idea of tying the two together with this book, this novel. And we kind of liked the idea, okay, it's a book, this is a world about books, so that made sense to us. I don't know, does that answer your question?
How did it take for you guys to actually create a game? And you said that you were running low on funds, so
Yeah.
how did you manage that, and what did your publisher say when you talked with them about your planning that didn't work out?
It took 2 years. And what was the second part?
What did your publisher say? Did you meet your schedules regardless of the money running out?
Well, we worked hard to meet our schedules. Sometimes we met them, sometimes we didn't meet our milestones. And but we always got close enough, you know. And then we had two publishers because we had Sunsoft. And then we also would have a Broderbund. And so we were at different places with both of them. And so, you know, I think we kept up pretty well. It took 2 years, though, totally, to create the game from start to finish.
Thanks.
Yeah. I have no idea what time it is, and if I'm anywhere near. Okay, good. Okay.
So thanks again for Myst also. It was also inspirational to me as I was growing up. So when I played it, it took me about 5 days, about an age a day. I had friends that finished it in like one sitting, one day. When you were developing it, did you have any kind of time in mind, like, oh, you were kind of aiming for, 6, 7, 10, 12 hours of gameplay, or was it just get through it how you get through it?
I don't think so at all. No. I mean, like I said earlier, we were creating this world for ourselves. There wasn't a lot of games, or none that we had experienced, that set a precedent for hours of gameplay. So if there had, I'm sure we would have felt like, okay, well, we need to give people this many hours of gameplay. But so we were just creating this world that we thought would be really cool and interesting and fun, and it was a fun place for us to experience as we were creating it. We were living in that world. That's all we had ever done, was live in the worlds we were creating and enjoy them as we created them, and then go on to the next world. And we never just even for a little bit, thought about like, oh, it's going to take this many hours to experience this. Now, we watched people play it then in our testing, and so we could see, oh, this takes a while. This is good. They're enjoying it. People are hooked for this amount of time. People enjoy the place. And they don't get bored. That was the main thing, you know. And so, yeah, but we never intended from the beginning for it to take a certain amount of hours.
Thank you.
Way in the back.
What are you and your brother doing now?
The Immortal Augustus Gladstone. It's about a guy who, it's a fictional film, about a guy who believes he's a vampire. He believes he's immortal. It's kind of filmed in a documentary style. And so this crew follows him around. He lives in a vacant hotel, and he's out to find a relative. It's not necessarily a comedy, believe it or not. Yeah, so we're going to be, it's probably this summer, I think, you know, that will be coming out. So look for it.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
Hi, Phil Fish. You followed me back on Twitter a couple days ago, and that made my week. I just wanted to say, I grew up obsessing on your games for years and years and years. I beat Riven without looking up any information anywhere. It took me a full year. The first video games I ever made were Myst clones in black and white HyperCard, and then I spent years and years and years writing my own age books and really getting into world building. And you know, that's kind of what I do for a living now. And my question is, will you please sign my copy of the Book of Atreus?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, very nice meeting you. Very nice meeting you.
I've been so obsessed with your world my entire life.
All right.
This is the one talk I see at GDC this year. It's yours.
You want it too?
Yeah, to me.
All right,
my God.
There you go. It's great to meet you. I love your game, by the way. I love it. Oh yeah, it's beautiful. All right. Oh, way in the back.
Hello. I just have a quick question about the protagonist, the person playing the game. I was always curious if you had in your mind a backstory for how this person acquired the book.
Absolutely not. No. We really strongly felt like that the protagonist in the game, or you, was just whoever was playing the game, and so that was really important to us. Now, you know, it's funny because I know other stories have evolved. Like people have said the stranger or something, but it was, and I don't even know what that means now. But it's, but yeah, we always felt like, you know, it needs to be just whoever's playing the game with their. They need to really feel like they're in this place themselves, and that it's them in this world, rather than playing the part of some other person. In Myst, that was really important to us.
Cool, thank you.
Yes, you.
Okay, hi. I just have two comments that I'd like to make. One is that the whole metaphor of you know, writing books and then going to the worlds that you write is such a incredible story idea that it holds up so well. I just wish more people would take that idea and do something with it because it's such a cool idea. And second is, you and I have never met, but we have spoken on the phone. My name's Jack Wall, and I wrote the music for the sequels, Myst 3 and 4.
Totally, right.
And it gives me great pleasure to give you a huge debt of gratitude that I owe you right now. Thank you, sir.
Nice to meet you. about you? No? Okay, in the back.
Hi. Yeah, I recently dug out my old copy of Myst and went through the journal that I had with all the notes of solving the puzzles, and it was amazing to go through those memories again. And so I'm curious, whose idea was it to include that in the package, the journal?
I don't remember whose idea it was to include it in the package, so I'll just say Broderbund's. But I know one of the things we felt strongly about, and it was the idea to not have an instruction manual. And I don't know if newer versions of the game have an instruction manual. I know one of the original Mysts didn't, because we really felt like, people shouldn't have much instruction when they start playing, and they didn't, and we felt like they didn't need it. So, but I don't know is the answer.
Well, it was fantastic, and thank you.
You've said that your drive for making the game was that you want to make worlds that you would want to, you liked for yourself. And you've also said that, that you didn't care how long the game was, and you almost forgot about puzzles when preparing this talk. So I guess my question is, why was it so essential if there be puzzles filling the game?
Oh, it's not essential at all. But they slow people down, and then they get to experience the world a little bit more slowly. But yeah, I mean, for me, I just love being in the world. I do like the story. Puzzles, I think, they can tend to strengthen that story a little bit more. If there could be a game, and I'm sure there could be a game with no puzzles, and where you could have story somehow, I'm sure that could work. I know there can be a game with no puzzles and no story, and it could work. Minecraft does that amazingly well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I think we're over. Has time run out?
I'm afraid this room is on a very rapid turnaround. We're going to have to cut
All right,
here.
cool. Thanks so much for coming.